My introduction to harness racing was through my family. I'm the fourth generation of Rando to do this in some capacity. My father's a hobbyist trainer, then my aunt, uncle are professionals, and my great-grandfather and grandfather were semi-professional one time or another. My first real inclination to like the sport probably started when I was 5 and 6. I used to always watch the races, but I always had a passion for the gallops as well, and I wanted to be a jockey. Then when I turned about 12, I got way too tall for that, so driving seemed like the natural progression from that. My first steps probably were sort of when I was 12 and got a stable hands license, and then we didn't immediately progress to letting me drive track work until I was about 15, and then everything rolled on quite naturally thereafter. I quite clearly remember my first track work drive. It was on an old horse that Brian Portelli had given my father for me to learn to drive on, called Carl Slim Data. And I went out there and I hit a wheel pretty much the second I went on the track, and I thought, well, this isn't for me, but he said, get on and go back out. And that was it. I never stopped after. Honestly, I've never really had that much interest in the training side of things at all. Still don't really. I only have really interest in driving, and then my other interest is probably more so on the media side of things if driving doesn't work out. But driving always created an allure to me. Jockeys were always the star of the gallops, and it feels like drivers are the stars of the trots, so it seems befitting. Driving wasn't really working out when I first started driving races, and then the opportunity arose to go work at Godolphin, and I figured I'd spend a few months in that environment to see how I just handled the thoroughbred racing side of things generally. And it didn't really seem like my cup of tea, so I went back to driving pretty passionately thereafter. My first winner was on a horse called The Times Are Changing at Bathurst. It was on the 9th of August 2019, or 8th of August. I have it tattooed on me, I should remember. But I quite clearly remember the race still today. He was 3 fens, and I was sitting there at the 600 trying to drop my hands back in the grips, and I couldn't get my hands back, and I thought, well, I'm fiddling around doing this and it's going to cost me winning, so I just sat there, and the one behind leader peeled off at the top of the straight, and I got the saloon passage through, and he did the rest for me.
The times are changing, hitting the lead. The times are changing. Lucas Rando gets the job done.
I've been incredibly fortunate that I've been able to progress in the manner I have, largely due in part to the fact that I've worked for some outstanding trainers. Paul Fitzpatrick and Gavin Fitzpatrick were better to me than I could have ever hoped anyone could have been, and I owe largely everything to them. And I'm now in a position where I'm very fortunate to be working for Jared Ouch, and he's an outstanding trainer, was a very good driver in his own right, so I'm in the right environment.
So when you think of career influences, there are a few names straight away that have clearly had a massive impact.
Yeah, for sure, and I'm probably very fortunate in a sense that I have always admired, a lot of the older drivers especially, like, not necessarily in that I've had anything to do with them, but I adore Chris Lewis and Chris Alford and people like that. And then I've been fortunate to have people like Robbie Morris and even Josh Gallagher on standby for advice whenever I need them. And Trevor Munday from day dot when I first started driving track work has been there every step of the way to talk me through it all. He still does. The day very rarely goes by where I don't speak to him. I owe a lot to him as well. My first winner for Paul was pretty cool because I always adored Rowan Holmes, a horse, and he used to race in the green and yellow naturally. So my first winner for Paul was on a horse called Huey Jr. at Penrith. And I remember I'd only had a couple of drives for him at that point. I remember going into the driver's room with the colours on, and it felt surreal just getting to wear him. So getting to win on him was pretty special, and it still is to this day. Menangle naturally has its own esteem to it, being the metropolitan track around, but Penrith has this sort of rustic feel to it, and it was probably my local track growing up, so it harbours sentimental value in itself, yeah.
Southbound Trainers running on strongly.
Southbound Train by far and away is my favourite horse I've had anything to do with. If it wasn't for him, I would have stopped driving when I went to the gallops. It was just fortunate that we had him racing at the time, and he's the family pet, so he's just been incredible to me. I consume an unhealthy amount of racing. It truly is my passion in life. The one track I'd love to drive at more than any other is Gloucester Park. I just think the racing over there is simply elite. It's still it's so competitive. The drivers are aggressive. The racing is entirely dependent on tempo and people making moves still. So it'd be a privilege to one day be able to go and drive over there. And a lot of my favourite drivers drive over there. Junior, Chris Lewis, as I mentioned earlier, Kyle Harper, Vogue. Denny Roberts is doing a phenomenal job. It's such a wonderful deep pool of drivers over there. So yeah, I love the racing in Perth. I've probably tried to model myself on a variety of different drivers, they themselves aren't particularly similar at all, but I feel like every driver has an aspect of their game that you can implement in your own to sort of improve your own driving. Say, for instance, someone like Jimmy Douglas is an incredibly smart driver. He's very clever in the way he drives and the gaps he takes, driving for luck. Then there's people like Josh who doesn't get, you're hard pressed to find someone that can get more out of a horse than him. And then there's people like Cam, the way they hold horses' mouths and the way they get them to travel. There's just so many different people. I can stand here all day and name people that have influenced me.
If you could win any race in harness racing, anywhere in the world, what race would it be?
It's a three-way tie between the WA Pacing Cup, the Renshaw Cup and the Miracle Mile. Those would probably be the three.
If you could drive any horse, past or present, in a race, who would that be?
Oh, that's a tough one. Leap to Fame looks pretty cool. I don't think I could handle the pressure, but growing up, Blacks at Bake was my favourite horse. And one of my core moments that probably made me want to do this for a living was when he won his 4th Inter Dominion here at Penangle, so probably Blacks at Bake, yeah. In 5 years' time, I'd love to be a fully established senior driver, just be driving full-time. But alternatively, if that doesn't work out, the professional form side of things is probably my backup, yeah.
Do you have any superstitions, anything that you have to do before you come to a race meeting, anything that you won't do, or are you a pretty chilled out customer in that respect?
I used to have 1,000,001 superstitions and they didn't really do a great deal, but these days I always have a tendency to pray before I go out on the track. Not that I'm an especially religious person, but it's just something I've always done for every race or trial. And there's a few lucky pairs of socks that get around.